And now I'd like to introduce our head men's basketball coach, Duggar Baucom, as he will take the floor and give us a little bit of his background. Coach, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Millage. Thanks for having me on. Gosh, the Mother Emanuel shooting seems like the other day. Think I was here 2 months and 2 days when that happened, that tragedy happened. We had to cancel workouts that morning, but it's hard to believe it's been 5 years. But thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Look forward to answering questions and being a part of this.
Good deal. Coach, for those that may not be fully familiar, why don't you give a little bit of background on your coaching history? You started out as a police officer up in Charlotte, a couple different kinds as a state patrolman and everything, and then you got into coaching and eventually into college coaching. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I'm from Charlotte. Played basketball in high school. I was a much better baseball player than I was basketball player. Went to Western Carolina. Thought I was going to be a baseball player at Western Carolina. Unfortunately, Coach Haywood had different ideas for me. I always joke he turned me from a student athlete into a student pretty quickly when he saw me hit and throw. So went to Western. Had some family issues. My dad got sick. Came back and worked in family business. He ultimately died very young, 42 years old. And I didn't want to work in a trucking company the rest of my life, which I was doing at the time that I had quit school to help him. So I went back to applied in Charlotte, went to law enforcement, quit school, was in law enforcement for 9 years, 5 years in Charlotte, 4 years with the Highway Patrol. And on Christmas Day of 1990, I actually had a heart attack. And I needed 8 months to get my retirement from the state of North Carolina. They wouldn't let me work a desk job, and here I was, couldn't be in law enforcement anymore, couldn't be a trooper anymore, and I didn't have my education, so I went back to college, and I was on the 17-year plan. So from the moment I started college, August of '78, I'll let y'all all do the math on this. August of '78, I graduated May of '95. So I preach to my players, I am the picture of what not to do when it comes to education. So I graduated from graduated from UNC Charlotte, started at Western Carolina, graduated from UNC Charlotte in 1995. And Bob McKillop, the head coach at Davidson, who used to be in the Southern Conference, one of the best coaches in the country, gave me an opportunity to be on his staff. I was on his staff for a year as the DOBO, administrative assistant. It was a non-paying volunteer job. Now, he didn't tell me that till after the interview, but I was with him for a year. We went 25-3 during the regular season. We actually went 14-0 in the SoCon, actually beat Citadel that year. They came to us. We played them once that year and won up there. And then we got upset. We won 19 games in a row, got upset for the conference tournament. The conference tournament, we lost to Western Carolina in Greensboro. So I left Davidson after a year. I wasn't making any money. I was 35 years old, and I got a job at Mars Hill College as their top assistant. I say top assistant because they only have one assistant. So I was top assistant. I went from making no money at 35 years old to making $17,000 a year as my annual salary, and I thought I was rich. I was there 2 years, and then I went to Northwestern State, which is a D1 school out in Natchitoches, Louisiana. They're in the Southland Conference. At the time, I became a single dad. I had a 12-year-old. He decided to come live with Dad and lived with me my last year at Mars Hill, and then moved with me to Louisiana. We were there for a year. Unbeknownst to me, my coach, he left this out of the interview process, but he was actually suing the school to be the AD, and he ended up getting fired at the end of that year. So we spent exactly 1 year in Natchitoches, Louisiana, my 13-year-old then. So we moved back to North Carolina. I'm out of coaching for a year, work at a golf course. I think my coaching career is over. And a buddy of mine that I was at Davidson with gets the head job at Western Carolina, and I go there and was his recruiting coordinator for 3 years. Got the head job at Tusculum, D2 school in Greenville, Tennessee. I was there 2 years. Fortunately, my first head coaching job. There 2 years, we won 2 championships. Won a regular season championship my first year, won a conference championship my next year, and we went to the NCAA tournament. And we happened to play the number one team in the country, Bowie State, and we lost on a 3 at the buzzer in overtime to Bowie State. And we lost 91-88. And at the end of the game, I did my radio show, and a guy came up to me and said, "Coach, I love the way your team plays." And I said, "Well, thanks. I wish we'd have got one more stop." And I go to walk off, and he grabs my arm, and he said, "Coach, I'm Donnie White. I'm the athletic director at VMI, and I'm looking for a basketball coach. Would you ever have an interest in coaching at a military school?" So ended up being the coach at VMI for 10 years, and now I've been blessed to be at the Citadel for 5. So that's kind of my journey. I would say in coaching, certainly the road less traveled. I wouldn't advise it for anybody.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And you mentioned your son, but you also have 2 stepsons that both had very different graduations in recent weeks. And you've got one who's about to go off to the Naval Academy and one who just graduated from the Citadel. What's it been like watching those two, live out the last few months during this pandemic and not have the graduations and the pomp and circumstance that they deserve?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy, so we finished up the tournament in March, early March, came back and worked a week, and our kids finished recognition day. They actually, whoever at the Citadel decided to do this, I think it was one of the most brilliant ideas of anything I've ever been a part of. I'm sure it started with the Commandant's office, of course, with the general, but we moved up recognition day here 2 weeks. It was supposed to be after spring break, but that Friday, we did recognition day. I was here at 4:00 when my guys started recognition day that morning, and they got through recognition day, finished classes, and went home. And I haven't seen my kids since. They've been home since, I guess, March 13th, my team. With my team leaving, that meant that my 2 sons are end up going to be at my house to finish school. So my Citadel cadet ends up coming, living with us, moves out of barracks, comes, lives with us. And then our high school senior at Academic Magnet, he's at home. So I'm not smart enough to do homeschooling. Thank goodness they weren't elementary kids. They were, doing online teaching with professors. But Gray ended up graduating with a political science degree from the Citadel. Very proud of him. He's commissioned in the Air Force. He'll leave in September to go to San Angelo, Texas. He's an intelligence officer with the United States Air Force. Extremely proud of him. And then Cade actually graduated yesterday. They actually were able to do a diploma presentation yesterday morning, and he's graduated Academic Magnet and leaves July 1st for the Naval Academy. So very proud of my kids. Gray went through a virtual graduation with the Citadel, which is kind of unusual. Watched it from our living room, but I thought the Citadel did an awesome job with the circumstances presented to them, how they handled that.
Yeah, especially considering everything going on, it's definitely been a lot of people have been learning how to think on their toes and come up with some very creative ideas. And speaking of creative ideas, we're going to jump into some of the submitted questions. And folks, as you have questions throughout the next hour or so, if you want to still submit some, feel free to use the chat feature. You can either put them for everybody to see, and then we'll try and get to it. You can also direct message me through the chat feature to ask your questions. Or if you just want to hold on to it to the end, we will open it up for the last 15 minutes for questions then as well. So, but we're going to jump into the submitted questions. And you've already kind of touched a little bit on it, Coach, but how are you and your staff keeping the guys engaged and focused on skill development, classwork, and everything during this pandemic?
Yeah, Millage, that's an awesome question. It's uncharted waters for all coaches. I've never been away from a team that I've coached this long. It's going on, starting our 4th month, I guess. But when we broke, we had a meeting before they broke for spring break. And then they gave them advice not to come back after spring break because of the pandemic. So each of my coaches, I have 3 full-time assistant coaches. I have a director of operation. My 3 coaches each have 4 cadets that they're assigned their academic responsibilities. So they're very close contact with those 4. They know when tests are. They know how many tours or cons they have. Very on top of those 4 individuals. Now, Of course, the buck stops with me, so I know from my coaches everything that's going on. So we just maintained that structure that we had. And so each of my coaches, on an every other day basis, either talk, text, FaceTimed with the players on their academic team. And then I would at least talk to them once a week, sometimes twice a week. I'm not a FaceTime guy, but a lot of it, kids today like to do texting. So we did a lot of texting. Um, the whole point, Millage, when we broke, is to make sure the kids succeeded academically. That was the number one focus, because basketball was taken out of our hands. Our season was over. So, we wanted them to work out when they could, but paramount was academics. So our kids did amazingly academically. We had 4 knobs that for the second semester in a row got 4 O's. I think I have 5 that wear gold stars now. So just extremely proud of how they carried themselves through those last 2.5 months of school with the online learning. It wasn't easy. I know how, I have 2 bright kids at home, and I know how they struggled with the online learning, the whole concept. I didn't know what a Zoom call was 4 months ago. And now it's become, I'm on 3 or 4 a week, but it's been a challenge. But then once we got academics squared away with our guys, then we focused more on the team concept. So we started doing team Zooms. We didn't want them to be distracted at all. They were on enough Zoom calls without worrying about us. We did all our communicating through phone calls and FaceTimes. But once exams were over, we started a weekly Zoom call, and we've done everything from play trivia games on the Zoom calls. We've done a hot seat where we put a guy on a hot seat for 60 seconds, and his teammates get to ask him rapid fire questions, first thing that pops in your head. This week, we're going to have a guest speaker, a trainer from the Dallas Mavericks, is going to talk to our guys. So we've just tried to keep them engaged the best we can, because we can't lay hands on them and can't really watch them work out. Our strength department, through Coach D over in the Dog Pound, they've done a great job of, we have an app, a team app that they can give instruction on for the weightlifting part of it. But basically, we're trusting our guys to, make yourself bigger, faster, and stronger. Get in the gym, work on your game. And the lucky thing is my guys love basketball. So I think they're working very hard. A lot of them have jobs right now, so they're helping their families. Some of their families have been laid off, been furloughed. So about half my team's working jobs. So it's been a different experience for sure. Right now, we have such a diverse group doing different things. We have guys working morning, guys working nights, guys just working out. Last week, our team Zoom call was at 10:30 on a Thursday night. So we went 10:30 to 11:30. So not your normal time, but hey, kids are still up at that time. So it was very productive.
Awesome. And you mentioned you hadn't been on Zoom until a while ago, but I'm sure you've had to use it for something else, and that's recruiting. You've brought in 4 players for the 2021 season, 3 freshmen and 1 grad transfer. 2 had already luckily been on campus. I got to meet Owen and Brent both when they came on in the fall, and but 2 of them didn't necessarily get to come see campus. Kind of talk about the challenges of getting those 2 to buy into the program, buy into the school without setting foot, but then also with moving forward, you've already clearly probably started on the next round, and just talking about how the NCAA rules are kind of affecting recruiting right now.
Yeah, it's strange time in the world of basketball for sure. So once the pandemic hit, we were able to complete our tournament, but the very next week is when they started canceling the ACC tournament. Some teams played a game and then they canceled. Different leagues did different structures, had different formats, but basketball as we knew it was over as far as that goes. No Final Four, no March Madness. But our recruiting went on. We had signed 2 kids early. You mentioned Brenton, Owen. Both had traditional official visits during football season in the fall when we like to bring kids in, take them to Brent's games, get to watch football. And those kids got the traditional official visit campus feel, campus meetings, meet our players, which sell our program. They're the most important thing of our program, are our players. So they had the traditional, and then signed in November. So signed their letter of intent. So those guys were locked in. But we still had 2 spots to fill. And we were going to go grad transfers on probably both of them, just for to get older standpoint, and because of the pandemic. And those kids are usually more mature and have already been to college, have already been recruited. They kind of know how the process works. Our graduate program is, second to none, and that's usually a great allure for kids. So we signed our first kid, Tyler Moth, who played at Mansfield up in Pennsylvania, D2 school. He's a point guard there. We were able to recruit him basically through Zoom and phone calls and FaceTimes. Tyler, we told him about facilities, told him about the locker room, told him about the weight room, all the amenities that we have here. Being a grad transfer, the military really won't affect him, other than he has to be a high character kid that understands what my other 13 kids are going through. So knew right off after we did some research, high character kid, captain of his team, point guard. So we Zoomed with him, and he was a lot easier to recruit via the Zoom method. But then we still had a spot open, and Coach Bell did a great job of recruiting a kid from Aurora, Illinois, right outside Chicago. And Dylan Engler is his name. He's a 6'5", long, can play multiple positions, very athletic kid. And Dylan was in a prep school in Missouri, Link Prep, out of Branson, Missouri. So had to recruit him basically off film. I couldn't go out and see him live. The NCAA had shut us down from that. Had to do everything on video, which is not my favorite way to do things, because I like to witness them in person, like to read their body language. How do they react with their teammates? How do they react when they come out of a game, go into a game? How do they respond to coaching when they're coaching, the coaches give them instruction? So I wasn't able to do that as clearly being on video, but video, knew immediately he had talent, knew immediately he had athleticism, shot 40% from 3 in a very difficult prep school. So he checked all those boxes. Then when I met him initially, I liked him. He asked the right questions. Dylan was interesting. He was recruited by the Air Force Academy and was going to go to the Air Force Academy, and he had to retake his ACT, and he came up 2 points shy of what they needed him to do. So he was already familiar with the military structure. We showed him campus the best we could, virtually. And then we had a Zoom call with the whole staff so he could meet everybody. And about 2 or 3 days later, he committed, and I had an hour phone call with his family, and they're very excited. So certainly a unique way of doing it, but, this thing has taught us to do a lot of things, a lot different, be a little more creative.
Awesome. And so with those 4, you'll be back to 15 for the year. You've got 11 returners coming back, and you've got some great news either this week or last week that 3 of your players, Hayden Brown, Jerry Jean Higgins, and Jackson Gammons, all received their red shirts for last year. So they will all be back to redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore, redshirt junior. But kind of talk a little bit about each of your 11 returners.
Yeah, so really happy. Kate Brown in our compliance office did a great job with that. Andy in athletic training, and Ryan, my team trainer, did a great job with all the paperwork, getting that filled out for compliance. It has to go to the conference office, get approved. So all those kids had legitimate, season-ending injuries. And then if you want to throw in Connor Kern, who also was a projected starter, his career ended prior to the season. Now he's out of eligibility, but 4 guys that we were really, really dependent on had their season cut short because of catastrophic injuries. All of them are healed now. Jerry Jean went through surgery. His knee's back probably 80% right now, 85%. And then what nobody knew is Brady Spence played hurt all year. We had surgery Had to delay it about 3 weeks because of the COVID, but we were able to get him his knee surgery that he required, and he's in rehabilitation now. So to get those guys back and have an extra year is awesome. Look forward to that. But I mean, things start with Hayden. Hayden was easily our best player when he got hurt. Statistically, he was leading us in scoring. One of our top 2 rebounders, doing a great job from the 3-point line. I think he had 26 and 8 against Georgia. Outplayed Anthony Edwards, who's, if y'all know, plays for Georgia. In mock drafts, he's the number 1 pick in the NBA. So, I mean, Georgia has some very, very good players, one of the top recruiting classes in the country. And Hayden went toe-to-toe with those guys. And, you know, to start the last media timeout, we were down 2 points. And that was back when we had our whole team. And I thought that, you know, that we have a chance this year. And then Hayden goes down, and Jerry goes down, Jackson goes down. Brady gets hurt. Eddie Davis, who's a grad transfer, gets hurt. So all their seasons were cut short. So going back now, next year, everybody will come in healthy. Normally this time I would have all my kids on campus. I would have my freshmen in the bridge program. I would have all my other returners taking a class. I would be able to work out with them 8 hours a week, 4 hours on the court, 4 hours in the weight room. But with the pandemic, that's just not feasible or possible at this time. So like I said earlier, we're relying on them to work out. Hayden's the only one actually in Charleston. Everybody else is back in their hometown. But most of them have access to a gym, have access to trainers or other guys coaching them, high school coaches that they've played for. So we expect everybody to come back. One thing, we try to always turn a negative into a positive. One thing I told my staff is, at least if they're at home, we know they're eating well because they're eating mama's cooking, and we know they're getting plenty of rest. And that was how we kind of approached the last 3 months of the season, so we can get them bigger. We're a team made up of long, lean guys, and so we needed them to gain some weight and to get stronger. So I think with mama's cooking and getting in the weight room, and our training staff telling them what technique to use, what lifts to do, how many calories to take in, I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be fresher probably than we've ever been. Basketball's become a year-round sport, and we're going to treat this, again, as a positive. When they come back in August, we're going to plan on being the most connected, fresh team in the country.
Awesome. And we had a question come in asking, what are some of the things that Coach D's staff and then the athletic training staff are going to maybe start doing, maybe some of those conversations already about ways to avoid the injury bug as it affects the team sometimes?
Yeah, last year, I've been a head coach now going on my 18th year, and I've never really had a problem with injuries. I guess I've been very, very fortunate. Last year, it was interesting because the injuries we had were, season ending, and they were all different. They didn't come from overworking or overuse, or they were just odd injuries. Like Connor Kern hurt his over the summer, a hip labrum, which a lot of people, you hear of a lot of people getting shoulder surgery on their shoulder labrum, but you actually have labrums in your hip, and he actually tore it. And that's a pretty catastrophic injury for an athlete, and it certainly ended his career. He was a projected starter. So it started that summer. And then Jerry Gene Higgins had surgery when he was in the ninth grade, and he came back with some arthritis in his knee. Then he tears his knee, his other knee, probably compensating for his right knee, tears his left knee. So that's an odd injury. Jackson Gammons came in, probably was our best projected freshman. He had the most college-ready body. He had probably put up the best stats in high school, played on a high-level AAU team. And we just noticed the first 3 games. It was actually Coach Bell. He said, Jackson's not running right in practice. He just doesn't look like himself. So we were getting ready to make our trip to Southwest Missouri, Illinois, and Marist, a week-long trip. And we just decided, let's shut him down for the trip. was probably the best thing we did, and may have actually even saved the kid's life, because we did some examination and saw that his femur, he had a stress reaction in his femur. So a stress reaction is right before a stress fracture. And if the largest bone in your body ends up breaking, then it can change an athlete's career forever. Plus, you have some femoral arteries. You have some things that could have been catastrophic. So luckily, we found that in him. So we shut him down. So he played 3 games, and just bizarre type injury. A lot of it, they think, maybe came from Jackson's a very squared away cadet, and he knobby walked, how our knobs walk. And the doctors think that may have put a lot of pressure in that certain area on his femur from knobby walking in his boots and stuff. He'd never had a problem with that before, but we were able to overcome that by just shutting him down completely. And then Hayden's a hamstring, and we tried to bring him back on a couple opportunities, and it just never worked out. He hurt it again, and set him out another month, and then he hurt it again. And so we said, let's don't waste his year. Let's go ahead and shut him down. So really depleted our team. I mean, nothing like I've ever gone through as a coach. But so Coach Deal, they'll handle it just like they always do, trying to make our guys bigger, faster, high tempo, high intensity workouts. Joe Varga is actually our strength coach for basketball, who works directly under Coach D. He's talked to the kids. Andy's staff has been amazing in rehab. Our kids have been very diligent rehabbing. And then we get to Brady, who had the knee surgery actually in April. He's able to walk up and down stairs now. So he's coming along as planned. We hope to get our hands on him back on the court in September. So if everything goes as planned, we'll have him back, because he had an incredible year playing on one leg. Those guys will use their expertise in the lifts that they do. But I don't think it had anything to do with training. We actually trained probably less wear and tear on the court than we ever had. We really cut back Operation Find a Way, which is one of our training rituals that we do every year. So I don't know. It was a flukish thing, and something as a coach I hope I never have to go through again.
Definitely agree on that. And just, from knowing those guys, knowing how hard they work, I can only imagine what some of them are going to look like. When Haybro came back from after his freshman year, he was a different looking player. So if they put in the kind of work that Hayden has put in previous years, you could have a very good looking squad coming in September, October, November. Speaking of your returners too, you kept your entire freshman class intact. And this was something you kind of wanted to talk about as well. A couple years ago, you had 5 players leave the program for all different reasons. But this year, you were able to keep that entire freshman class intact. What's been the difference in the way that you've recruited, or the type of players that you're looking at, and maybe some of the ways that you approach these kids these days?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we got here, we tried to kind of go with the model that we'd used at VMI. We'd had great retention for 10 years at VMI. Had very, very few kids leave. Once we got here to Charleston is a kind of good and bad. You have the great city of Charleston, but they're allowed to get out enough to know what the other world looks like. I guess in Lexington, Virginia, you go outside and you're in the middle of the Shenandoah Valley. There's not a whole lot to explore, and you don't get off campus near as much. So our third year, we had some attrition. All 5 kids left for different reasons. Preston Parks was the SoCon Freshman of the Year. He was an outlier in that, he came back, really didn't want to be a cadet anymore. He just wanted to play basketball. Well, that's not going to fly here. You're going to wear a uniform. You're going to cut your hair. You're going to go to class. Those are the staples. So we had to amicably part ways, and he's since been at 3 schools in 3 years. But then the other 4, the really shocking ones were Frankie Johnson and Leo Allende, 2 guys that started. I mean, Frankie started 61 games in his 2 years here, and those guys went into their junior year. Leo had started 17 games the year that he decides to leave. And both of those guys were in the same company. They both explained to me, Coach, we're just tired of, the cadet life. We want a little bit more freedom. And Frankie was just going to go back to Darlington and work. And I said, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to go to college. So he ended up going to Wingate, and he'll graduate from Wingate and ended up being all conference in the South Atlantic Conference. And then Leo went to Berry and played at Berry, actually started this year. And they had a top 15 team in the country. So those two guys were the most disappointing because they contributed. I mean, everything was great basketball-wise with those guys. They just had some, they would just had kind of hit a threshold of what they were wanting to deal with from the core standpoint. Both good students, too. So then we had Tariq Simmons, a freshman, and Rob Johnson, a freshman. And Rob was from Florida, and his mother in the season really, I guess you call it a disease. She was struck with a sickness that paralyzed her from the chest down. And so Rob made a decision towards the end of the year, I want to get closer home to Florida. So he went home, and he's in a JUCO down there now. He actually took a year off to help his mama rehabilitate, and he's in a JUCO, a junior college now. And then Tariq Simmons was from Columbia, and he was probably the one that was probably the least fit for the military school. I mean, he made it through his first year, but he said, this isn't for me, which a lot of kids do. And now he's at South Carolina State. We actually scrimmaged against him last year, and he's doing great things up there, and he'll get his degree from South Carolina State, plays for Murray Garvin, a great coach at South Carolina State, great mentor. So all five of those guys ended up leaving, but the crazy thing, Frankie and Leo left some holes because, those were starters. So we look at demographics, and, the NFL, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but the NFL spends millions upon millions of dollars to rank guys and combine guys. If you're an NFL personnel director, you have every film of that kid since high school and every snap he's ever taken in college. And you can run him in the 100, you can give him a test, you can run him into 40, you can do the combine. And in the NBA, they are 50% accurate in their first round picks. I mean, 50% of those guys end up being what everybody thought they were going to be. We're trying to recruit guys. Can they help us in basketball? Can they help us win games? Can they develop? Can they handle the core? Can they handle the academic load? So it's really a unique process. So we said, hey, let's change up a little bit. And so we went after a kid 2 years ago, Dimitri Georgiadis from Richmond. Now, if you look at the demographics of this kid, high SAT, dad, career, military in the Air Force, goes to Benedictine, which is an all-military school, all-boys military school in Richmond, Virginia, went there for 2 years. His mom's a college professor, so academics is important. So he checked every box. So if we ever had an ideal fit, it would probably be Dimitri. And he came here for a year and said, Coach, too much confinement. I need more freedom in my college life than this. And so he leaves. So to say it's inexact science would be an understatement. But last year, we brought in 5 kids that were all high academic kids. Like I said, 3 of those guys are 4.0 students. The other 2 guys are well over 3.0. And they just clicked as a unit, and they want to graduate from here together. I will tell you this is pretty unique. I think this says a lot about a character of a kid. So Rudy Fitzgibbons is from Atlanta, Georgia, smaller point guard. Rudy had some crazy things happen to him during the year. He lost his grandmother right at Christmas. He had his best friend commit suicide, a kid that he lived with for 2 years. I mean, his family tragedy was crazy. Then in the conference tournament game, he goes through a dislocation of his finger. So I'm in the hospital with him after the tournament game, and his dad is there with him, and they literally take off after the hospital visit and go to Atlanta because Rudy is going to eulogize his best friend who has just committed suicide 2 weeks previous, which is a lot on an 18-year-old kid. But he takes off with his hand splinted up. So a week goes by. The commandant staff's nice enough to give him bereavement leave. So he's going to finish up at home, then go to spring break, and then return with us. So we have recognition day on that Friday. Rudy finds out on a Thursday afternoon. That's when they dropped it on the knobs. Hey, we're going to have recognition day tomorrow starting at 4 a.m. Greatest decisions ever been made at the Citadel, I think. Well, word got back to Rudy in Atlanta. And Rudy texted me and said, Coach, I want to come back for that. And I said, well, Rudy, I think that would be amazing. What do your parents think about that? He said, well, they're fine with me. So Rudy took that splint off his hand and left his home in Atlanta at about 10 o'clock at night and drove through the night so he could be here at 4 o'clock in the morning to finish recognition day with his knob class, with his Alpha Company classmates. And he's out there flipping tires, carrying telephone poles, doing push-ups, sit-ups, doing everything with his hand that was displaced less than a week before. So that just tells you a little bit about how tight that group was or is. And I think that's why the retention was so good. They're great students. They bought into what the Corps is all about. I went through the whole year with those 5 guys, and nobody had a tour or con of those 5 freshmen. So I think that says a lot about their character.
Definitely. And, that's one of those stories that'll definitely make its way around that group and hopefully make that entire group a little bit tighter and closer. With all the retention that you have had after this year and with the character guys you do have, Rudy, Jackson, Fletcher, all of that group and all the others, what do you think will be the biggest area of improvement for the team, whether it be on the court or off the court this year?
Well, I think certainly talent will be more talented because playing without Hayden, playing without Jackson, playing without Jerry, Brady being hurt, I think just from the get-go we'll be more talented, which we needed. I mean, we were playing our 13th guy sometimes and 12th guy in a normal year had to play big minutes for us just because some nights we dressed 7 or 8 scholarship guys and a couple walk-ons. So it was really a position I've never been placed in. And in all those games, we battled for a half. I mean, you were at all of them. And for a half, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, we were right there and then kind of ran out of gas or talent took over or whatever. But the craziest thing about that entire season, you would think, oh, y'all, you went over in the conference and you ended so poorly and decimated by injuries. My team never had a bad practice. It was crazy. Most coaches would have been, at wit's end with their team during that whole period. You'd go to practice and the kids would come in feeling sorry for themselves. Titus Baptiste, my grad transfer as our point guard and as our leader, never allowed that to happen. Every day was a new day. Every game we went into, those kids thought they could win. I think this pandemic, being away from each other, has only brought us closer. I know that's counterintuitive, but I think it's actually made guys realize how much they miss basketball and how much they miss each other. Some of them have actually gone and stayed with each other and worked out with each other during this time. So I think we'll come back a lot closer unit and come back a lot more of appreciation for basketball. Basketball's, you're not entitled to play basketball. It's something that, your skill and your academics have allowed you to be a Division I basketball player. And it's not something everybody gets to do. And it's been taken away from them now for 4 months. So ultimately it'll be 6 months probably before we get them all back together. So I think the unity of the team will be paramount. I think that'll be at an all-time high. I do think they'll be fresher. Last year, statistically, we were the best. We've been on field goal percentage defense. We fouled less than we ever fouled. Our three-point percentage, I would have liked it to be a bit higher, but we had to have different guys shooting it. Fletcher Aby had a unbelievable breakout year as a freshman. He surpassed everything that we thought in the preseason. He just took the challenge and was kind of our go-to guy for most of the year, and was a marked man all through conference season. So we went 6-5 in non-conference play, and then you hit the SoCon, and that's a whole different animal that we can talk about in a moment. But so I'm proud of the kids. I can't wait to get them back and just be around them. You know, we've gone through a difficult time in my country and in our country, and I just feel like now's when I need my kids kind of under my wing. You know, they're all very safe with their parents, but you go to bed worrying about them every night, and I'll just be glad when they need to be hugged, I can be the one doing the hugging, and my assistants can. So I think our unity and love for basketball will be as big as anything strategic we can do.
Awesome. That's all really great. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about the guys and the conversations that have occurred the last few weeks, led by the players, and how they've all been very conscious about how they treat each other and those around them. So if nothing else, the character of your guys will definitely carry them through times like this, all the way back through March and all the way till now. Want to touch on, you kind of talked about improvement a little bit, and two pieces of improvement the guys have not gotten to enjoy yet. And their actual physical improvements to the dog pound and McAllister Fieldhouse. I got to see both of those, and they are great. How do those two improvements help your game day, and how do they help you with recruiting, and how do they help your team?
Yeah, those two things are unbelievable from a visual standpoint when we bring kids to recruit on campus. Coach D and his staff, they've been great the 5 years I've been here. And that place has always been top notch, very, very well run. But now with the amenities in there, you know, the way it's, the appeal when you walk in, the color scheme, everything was done first class by Coach D. And, you know, that was a gift from alumni that actually allowed us to do that. And then my athletic director, Mike Capaccio, who's been phenomenal through this, since he's been my AD, but certainly through this entire process. You know, he gave Donnell the go-ahead to do that. He realized how important it was for all sports. I mean, football has a large group in there, and that's kind of their weight room is, you know, over in their facility, but all the teams use it. So now just for lack of a better term, the curb appeal, you know, when you walk up to it, it looks as good as any weight room in the conference. So that's a huge amenity that we now have. And then you put Coach D's energy and Coach Joe's energy behind that. When they talk to recruits, they know when they go in that place, they're going to work. And our kids have put on weight because of that. And then the bleachers, when I first got here with Jim Center hired me, he said, you know, we need new bleachers. We need a new floor. And I was blessed 2 years in by the graciousness of Jimmy Reed, one of our alumni, gave us the money to redo the floor, which was a monumental project. And we were able to get the floor done. But the seats still needed some work. And everybody on this call is sitting there, seats in McAllister Fieldhouse, and some are broken and some are in disrepair. And it was, you know, it was what we had. But again, under the leadership of Mike, you know, he went across campus. He got some help from the commandant staff, of course, General Walters. The cadets use our arena probably a lot more than we use our arena, and probably twice as much, you know, for anything from speaker series to impromptu meetings or briefings by Gino. Or, they're in there a lot, but they helped with that. And Mike had the foresight to see that there's an opportunity here. So collaboratively, they got together and we were able to make that improvement. And it's absolutely awesome. I just went out and my court got cleared yesterday for the first time. We've had tarp down on it. And I just went and stood at half court and looked up, and I was just very proud. I mean, it looks amazing. The company did an awesome job. We actually have handrails that our kids can get, not our kids, but more importantly, our fans can get in their seat comfortably. It's first class, and it helps. You know, you bring recruits in there. you don't have to sit them on one side anymore to try to not show the chairs on one end. But it's first class, and I had absolutely nothing to do with that other than have an awesome administration that had a vision and followed through with it.
Awesome. And we're going to hit one more submitted question before we open it back up. This past year, most of it was due to attrition. You've already kind of touched on this, but you're known for the run and gun, for very fast, fun style of play, a lot of three-pointers, a lot of possessions. I know we'd like to talk about, you don't think about it in basketball, you think about it in football, but you like to have the most possessions of any team in the conference and such. Had to slow it down. And I remember that game at Mercer. That was the first game. I remember there only being 7 guys eligible to dress due to injury. And you slowed it way down. I don't know if I had mentioned it to you. I was part of a game about 10 years ago when Augusta State had something very similar, and they had to slow it down, and they would run the ball up to the half court line. They would stop, and they would just run it down till 5 seconds on the shot clock and then run. It was just so excruciatingly painful, especially after having been used to how fast and fun y'all were. What's the plan moving forward to get back to that? And what kind of maybe adjustments will you make for this group that you have?
Yeah, we've recruited that now. Nobody got to see it because, we were so banged up. What Hayden proved at Georgia was what a mismatch nightmare he is for other teams. And what Brady proved towards the end of the year, even on one leg, is that he can be a formidable post presence. So we'll use both of those guys. And it kind of all starts with them. I mean, in basketball, you want to get the ball inside as much as you can. Even your 3-point percentage goes up once the ball goes inside, back to outside. So we'll be able to utilize those guys. Hayden in mismatches. Brady's an awesome passer. We'll throw it into him. Jackson Gambles will be one of our best 3-point shooters back on the court. Jerry Jean, one of our best 3-point shooters. He'll be back. All the kids we recruited can shoot. So yeah, we'll be back to run, fun and run, and still take good shots. And if we can keep our defensive numbers where they were last year, I think we'll be better without a doubt. The SoCon, I was figuring up today. So we've been 33-27 in our non-conference games here. Every year but one, we've had a winning non-conference season. We've won at South Florida, we won at James Madison, we won at Stetson, we won at Longwood, Campbell, a lot of places. And then we get into the SoCon, and it's a tough time to be a coach in the SoCon. Last year we were 13th in the RPI, the net ranking. So there's 32 conferences. So we're 13th. So when you're 13th, you're not much mid-major anymore. I mean, you're upper mid-major conference. We've had 2 teams ranked in the top 25 in the last 2 years. Last year, East Tennessee State won 30 games. Our league has gotten so good so quickly. I mean, really quickly. The ACC, our league's gotten so good that ACC has come and plucked 2 of our coaches, Mike Young at Wofford, now at Virginia Tech, and Steve Forbes now at Wake Forest. So it's night in, night out. It's really, really gotten tough. But I'll be glad to compete with those teams this year with our full team. I think we can surprise some people. I think there's going to be probably some low expectations, which is absolutely awesome. But our guys did not like what happened last year. They did not like it. And if you remember our first 2 games, we were semi-healthy, I guess you would say. First 2 league games, we lose by 1 at Sanford on kind of a fluky deal there. And then we lose here at by 4 to Western Carolina without Kalen Harris, who ended up being our leading scorer and leading rebounder. He was gone for a funeral. So if we win those 2 games, who knows how the season could have been. But I'm not a big woulda, shoulda, coulda guy. We were what we were, and I just look for the new opportunity coming up.
Awesome. And folks, at this time, we're going to open it up to anyone with some other questions. Just a reminder, you are currently muted, so please unmute yourself, introduce yourself so that everybody may hear your name, ask your question, and then we ask that you kindly remute yourself. So we'll go ahead and open it up.
Hey, Coach, Al Brower from Cincinnati. How are you today?
Hey, fine. Thank
Listen, listen. I know you touched on Fletcher and his scoring, but he was terrific to watch off the ball last year. He worked so hard.
Thank you. Fletcher is truly not the most athletic dude. Fletcher was always in the right position defensively. A lot of times we put him on their best player because we knew he would do what needed to be done because of his basketball IQ. Not the most quick guy laterally, but he's a fun guy to coach. Interesting story on Fletcher. So Fletcher played at Freedom High School, a very successful program in North Carolina, Western North Carolina. And Fletcher's coach was my point guard when I coached at Western Carolina. So Casey Rogers is his name. And Casey is an amazing coach. So we knew when we got Fletcher, he had been coached very well, very, very well in high school. He had been pushed to his limits. But thank you. And then, by the way, Fletcher is one of the 4.0 students and never had a tour or a con. So pretty remarkable freshman year for that dude.
Hey, Coach, here is my actual question. And I'm a 40-year basketball official. And last year I saw so many bad calls, but the refs, they never tried to help their partners out. And that's really the disappointing part.
Yes, sir. That's a great point. There's supposed to be a 3-man team. And to that note, we have gone with the new officiating consortium. We're going to be in with the SEC now. It's the first time we've done that in my tenure here. First time the Southern Conference has done it in 15 years probably. Mike Eads, who's a big-time official, has done some Final Fours. He's actually going to be like our sub-commissioner for our league, do our assignments. And I think officiating is just going to get better this year. Last year was such an outlier. I thought the officials had probably less to do with than they normally do. But you're right. I mean, it's a team effort for officials. If one guy misses, the other guy needs to pick it up. But, that's not a very fun word around my house, officiating. I hear it from my wife and hear it from my mom and my sister. They're never fans of the officials. They got a hard job to do, but hopefully it's going to improve. That's what we're hoping for this year.
Hey, listen, finally, I appreciate you sending a kind word out to A Company. I know Dan Murley knows that that's where the real athletes come from.
Well, we have a bunch of them in. Alpha's been very good. Yeah, we're proud of our guys in there. Hey, Brown and Jerry's.
And Coach, remember, I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, so you know where the good people come from.
Yes, sir. Queen City. That's home, and thank you. I miss Charlotte, but it's hard to beat Charleston, I tell you what. We love it here.
Hey, Coach, it's Hal Cobb. I'm class of 1992. I just want to say, even though we had some losing last year, I really was impressed with how hard the kids gutted it out. And I really like Caden Rice's game. I think he looks a little bit like Trevor Ariza to me. I think he's got, he seems a little distracted on the court sometimes, but when he's on, he seems to be incredible. But looking at what you've got coming in, where do you see Caden fitting in terms of your starting lineup this fall?
Caden's a great kid. You hit the nail on the head as far as being distracted. Our biggest thing with Caden is you can't let whether the shot goes in or not dictate everything else. A lot of shooters are like that. It affects their defense. It affects their rebounding. If they make a shot, then they're all feeling good about themselves. But he takes so many, he's going to miss some. It's a maturity process. I thought he was better at it last year than he was his first two. But he's 6'7" and he can shoot it. His focus, we need him locked in more. I think he knows this is his senior year, and a lot of times the light bulb goes off. And I always start to count down with my players, so I started with him this year. With our first practice, dude, this is the first one of about 99 practices you're going to have this year, and you got 33 games guaranteed in your life. After that, it's up to you. So you try to get them a sense of urgency that senior year. So we expect big things from him. He shot 35% from three, but he's easily capable with a little bit of shot selection of probably shooting close to 40.
Coach? Hey, Duggar, this is Joe Dettons. I was wondering if you could update us a little bit on the two new coaches in the conference.
Yeah, okay. So very, very intriguing. Talking about Jason Shea took over for Steve Forbes. Jason has been on Steve's staff the entire time, so he's very familiar with how ETSU does things. ETSU is probably one of the outliers in our league that basically all transfers are junior college kids, very few freshmen. The one freshman they had was Bo Hodges, who was State Player of the Year in Tennessee. So if they get a high school kid, he's really a good one. But Jason was on staff with Bruce Pearl and Steve when they were at Tennessee. So he's been around the block. He'll be a good coach. I don't expect them to be much different than they have been. Now at Samford, that's a whole unique situation. Bucky McMillan was a player at Birmingham Southern, and I coached against him when I was at VMI. We were in the Big South, and he was a player, and a very, very good player. And now he's won about 4 state titles in the state of Alabama, but one of the few guys that have ever gone from being a high school coach to a Division I coach. So it'll be interesting. The other interesting part about that, he hired his college coach to be his assistant, Dwayne Rebold, who's a legend among. He's one of the best coaches nobody's heard about. Did great things at Birmingham Southern. So both guys will do a good job, a really good job. And we have coaches. We have great coaches in this league with a lot of good players. So I hope some of the guys that put their name in the draft stay. We did have some attrition. Some guys transferred out and went higher. I was happy to see that. I would have helped them pack their bags to go. Really thrilled that some of them have left. A couple of them went to Wake Forest, followed Steve to Wake Forest, which more power to them. That was awesome.
Hey, Coach. Will.
Hey, Will.
Will, we can't hear you.
Okay.
We heard you say okay. That's about it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Still can't hear you, dude. I guess he muted himself. Hey, Coach, this is Xavier. How you doing?
Hey, Xavier, great to see you.
And I see Will is interrupting me now.
Can you hear me now?
Millage, maybe we could get him to chat.
Yeah, I was just about to chat with Will and get his question for it, but if you want to answer Xavier.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Xavier, how you doing, buddy?
Fine, Coach. This is a myth, so I'm going to say it anyway, but there is a myth that there's been friction over the past many years between Core Squad and the Core. And my question is, and I know it's a myth, it's never true,
Right.
How are our basketball guys integrating with the Core? And do any of our guys, will they have rank next year?
Our guys have, I think they've integrated as well as any last year's team, as well as any team that we've ever had. We didn't have one discipline issue. We never had a guy miss practice because of discipline. We do have one kid, our retention was amazing. We did have one kid, Alex Reed, who is now going to a Division II school. He had gotten to a situation where he liked to be off campus a little bit too much. So that was addressed. But no, our kids feeling great. We have some great leadership from Jerry Higgins, who's in Alpha Company, Hayden Brown, who's in Alpha Company, Caden Rice is in Romeo, Derek Webster's in Papa. So we got some guys spread out. Now with the sophomore shuffle, so it's going to be a little bit new. Some guys are going to be going some places that they haven't been before. So we hope that that'll go well. You know, we're kind of the test group for that. But no, our kids, they're very concerned about their academics, and then they bought into the whole package. They actually understand what the Citadel can do for them 3 years from now. And that's kind of the picture we try to paint. and all the guys on this call, I mean, everyone that's an alum on this call, I say it to y'all, y'all are what we sell. I mean, we sell y'all success stories when we recruit. There's not guys, Xavier, there's not guys lined up ready to put on a uniform and want to march and live in bunk beds and form up every morning. I mean, there's just not a lot of those dudes that want to do that, especially that are good basketball players.
Yeah.
But when we can sell them the success stories, hey, you come here and put up with this for 4 years, adapt, learn, become a better you coming out in 4 years, your opportunity is going to be unbelievable. And we use stories like you guys. So thanks for that.
Coach, we appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Will was able with the chat just to congratulate Coach's sons on the U.S. Air Force and everything. And then we'll open it up for one final question. Got a few more minutes, so anybody would like to take the floor for that last question?
Village, I've got one. This is Joe Wagner.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Coach, good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Question on the College of Charleston.
Yes, sir.
I was, you know, as you know, I run your clock and I do a backup clock over the college, so I hear their side of the story sometimes too. Although Bulldogs are number one, obviously. But are we just playing them there this year?
Yes, sir. I'll go in a little more depth with that. We've called a little, you know, they kind of made that a controversy, but I'll share some of that with you. So when we first got here, we inherited a contract with College of Charleston. Earl Grant, who's the head coach at CFC, who you know, Earl's as great a human as there is on the planet. I mean, great kid. I mean, he's not a kid anymore. He's a young man, but I recruited Earl. And Earl and I's history goes back probably 20 years. And so we played each other my first 2 years. We lost by, I think, 8 here my first year. Then we lost, I think, 11 there to open the season the next year. And then the contract was over. It's never really fit into either of our schedule plans the last 2 years or 3 years. But this coming year, the dates worked. The COVID, staying close to home was a great idea with some of the budget issues. So what we did, we signed a 1-year deal. It was an economic windfall for us. We play 3 guarantee games. We're required to bring in so much money a year, and we try to get that done in 3 years. And the College of Charleston was actually paying teams in our league, you know, a good bit of money to come there and play. So I talked to Earl and I said, hey, if you're going to pay those other guys, pay us. We'll come over there and play, and you'll draw a lot better with the Citadel being in Charleston than you will, you know, Western Carolina, for instance, who's come down there and played. So we're doing it a one-time deal this year. We're playing over there. It helps us financially meet our guarantee money. Their AD had made a comment, you know, that he can't believe he has to pay Citadel to play here. Well, you're playing other teams in our league, and, you know, you don't have football. You're able to spend all your money on basketball. I mean, there was some deals. And the crazy thing is he's the one that signed the contract. So, but my administration's been awesome. Mike signed it, and, you know, Mike's deal was, hey, we can do this every year. It's a very short travel for us and gives us the opportunity to, you know, play somebody in the city. I don't necessarily like playing Earl because I think so much of him as a person. And I think the feeling's kind of mutual. You don't like to play friends, but if it's good for the city and good for our kids, it may be something we look on down the road, do a little more of.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, great deal. Well, Coach, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know a few people had to jump off for meetings and such, but we greatly appreciate everybody that's taken the time for these dog talks. Next week, we've got a little different. As of right now, we are planning on it being an academic and compliance question and answer session. So if you have any questions about some of the new NCAA rules, some of the things that have been going on with the kids and how we have to do their schedules and stuff, make sure you tune in next week, because there will be some very interesting enlightenment issues that may come out of this. Coach Baucom, thank you again so much. Good luck this year, and we hope to see everybody out at a game hopefully in November.
Hey, I just want to thank everybody that came on the call. I know y'all had a lot better things to do than listen to me, but I appreciate the support and come see the new arena. I mean, I promise you'll sit in a much comfortable chair than you have been in the past. And I see some guys on here that support us greatly, and I can't thank you enough for all you do for us, not only financially, but more just your support. It means the world to me, my coaches, and our guys. So thanks for all that.
Thank you, everyone. And everybody have a great rest of the day, and go Bulldogs.